Okay. Up next, we have a session on strategies for e-retailers and how is it different in India. May I welcome on stage our first speaker for the session, Mr. Saran Chatterjee, VP Products, Flipkart. Saran is a savvy business manager, able to drive cross-functional teams in a matrix organizational structure to deliver and execute against established business goals. Prior to Flipkart, Saran worked with Yahoo as a senior director, global product manager, where he worked on defining and executing new and exciting monetization and distribution opportunities across all connected devices. Welcome, Saran. Our next speaker for the session is Mr. Vivek Pathak, Head Business Strategy and Operations, eBay India. Vivek has global management experience across markets in the US, Asia, and Europe in e-commerce, consumer retail, and financial services, with 13 plus years in driving business operations and sales across diverse geographies. He comes with these deep experiences in e-commerce and retail, having successfully led large international teams while understanding the technical infrastructure. Welcome, Vivek. The moderator for the session is Professor Amit Mehra. Professor Mehra is an assistant professor and research fellow at the Indian School of Business. He draws upon game theory, agency theory, and economic tools to research internet retailing, internet advertising, software product development, pricing and launch strategies, and human capital development for IT firms. He teaches business statistics and social media, online advertising, and web analytics course to MBA students at Indian School of Business. Welcome, gentlemen.
Working now? Okay. Thank you, Rashi, for the introduction. And let me start by saying that we have been talking about viral videos and stuff like that for the last 1.5 days. And our panel has been hit by a different kind of viral. One of our panelists has actually fallen sick with viral fever yesterday. And so he could not join us. But still, between Vivek and Saran, we have got very interesting contrast. And you're going to see that in their presentations. Because one is from eBay. So obviously, is going to talk about the marketplace model, and Saran is going to talk about the inventory-led model because he's from Flipkart. So we'll see this contrast of views and how they think about the emerging e-commerce scenario in India, particularly in India. So when we had a similar kind of a panel in the last year's conference, and there everything about e-commerce in that year, last year, was very positive. Everything was gung-ho. But challenges have emerged since then. Today, there are questions about what are the right strategies about e-commerce, and obviously you need a lot of money to, get the customers in and keep them with you. And obviously, you can't keep on spending money all the time to, achieve that. So you have to stop some time and, become a profitable business. So there are these kinds of challenges that are emerging, which is natural, and therefore that is sort of a maturing phase, I should say, into the Indian e-tailing industry. So that is one part of the story, and both our panelists are going to give their views on that part. The second part, which is relatively more futuristic for India, is that as e-commerce really becomes much more prominent of a competition to store selling, then store retailers will have to come up and think more seriously about how to compete with e-tailers. And this is something that is obviously not today in India, but I've been talking to a few of you outside this room, and everybody thinks that smartphones in India is not that distant anymore. Already there is a second-hand market for smartphones. My own car driver, he has like a 10,000 rupee a month salary, and he has a smartphone. And in that way, in 1 year, probably many more people will have smartphones. And if people are going to start doing commerce using those smartphones, then the scenario might rapidly change in terms of how people interact and buy stuff online. So if that is what is going to happen, then obviously stores will have to react. This is obviously already happening in the United States, and conventional retailers are having trouble in terms of dealing with Amazon. That's very much a reality today. So I'm going to start off the discussion in this panel by talking a little bit about my paper, which does not have data in it. All the other papers have had data in it. This is more about mathematical modeling using game theory. And I'm going to talk about this context, that how retailers like Target or Best Buy are going to react to Amazon? How are they going to compete with Amazon? So that's sort of the idea. It starts with talking about showrooming, which Anindo, when he was talking yesterday, he brought this up. You know the clicker? Oh, I think it's with me. Okay, fine. Thanks. So what is showrooming? And this showrooming is basically the thing that people. Suppose you want to buy a shirt, right? If you buy it straight off an online retailer, you haven't been able to wear the shirt and see how it looks on you, right? Simple. You haven't been able to check it out properly. You have been able to see the images of that shirt on the website, but that is perhaps not enough, right? So if you are were able to go to a brick and mortar store and were able to wear that shirt and see, hey, this is the one that looks good on me and I like the touch and feel of this. This is what I want to buy. And then if you can quickly check on your mobile phone that, okay, at Amazon or at the retailer competing, this is available at a cheaper price. I can get the same thing at a cheaper price. I've got the best product that I wanted for myself. So I'll just go and buy it at Amazon. So that phenomena is called showrooming. You basically check out the footfalls are there at the retailers, stores, but they don't convert. The conversion is going to Amazon. So that's what showrooming is. Is it prominent? Is it big? Yes, it is big. This is data from Comscore 2012, US data again. But consumer electronics, 63% people said that they are showrooming in this category. 63%. That's a very significant number. Apparel, clothing, and accessories, 43%. These are big numbers. And this really means that if people are getting worried about it, that's rightly so. So what are these retailers like Target or Best Buy thinking about? How do we compete with Amazon now? So what they're saying is Target has got an approach, Best Buy has got this approach. Okay, so they are thinking different things. That's sort of my idea to bring it across to you, that what are the different things they're thinking about. So Target is saying, okay, I'm just going to match Amazon's prices. So this is the price matching guarantee kind of a thing, which says this Amazon is cheaper for this product, and if you come up and tell me that Amazon has got this price, then I am going to match that price. You're not going to get it at my store at my price, but at Amazon's price. And so if there is no benefit of price by buying it at Amazon, you will better buy it at you are already at the store at whatever Shoppers Stop, Target, just buy it from there. So that is one strategy that people are sort of thinking about to counter showrooming. What do you think? Do you think it will work? No? Yes? Just let's see what you think. No's, hands up please. Quite a few of you. Yeses? There are a few yeses as well, right? So there is some confusion. So thankfully then there's this research can try to help resolve that confusion. The answer is in this case partly so. What happens is that only under market conditions where some amount of collusion is possible will the price matching guarantee work. So let me try to explain that intuitively a little bit more. So the idea here is, what will happen if let's say Target announces a price matching guarantee. Now if Amazon is going to raise its price, Target has already committed to matching Amazon's price. In some sense, it can also charge higher. So there is a kind of an implicit collusion that is possible. That's one possibility. But at the same time, by matching the price of Amazon, Target has made it harder for Amazon to, for people to convert at Amazon. So there is a competitive effect as well. So this is the best way to think about it. There is a collusive effect and there is a competitive effect. And the combined effect, whenever the possibilities of collusion is more in the market conditions, then the price matching will work, otherwise it will not work. If you want more details, then obviously I can refer you to my paper or we can speak offline, but right now I don't want to take more time than that. What about the other possibilities? Now this is Macy's, and Macy's has got a different kind of an approach, not Target and Best Buy's approach. So this is what they call product exclusivity. So I'll show you a 2-minute video about that. Play the video now. You will see the CEO of Macy's talking about this approach.
Which I can understand, but there's also this phenomenon in retailing, showrooming as they call it, where people come, they look at the merchandise, they touch it in your store, they talk to your associates and learn, and then they check and see if they can get it for a few dollars less at some other place online, and maybe they buy it that way. How do you respond to that phenomenon?
Yeah, and that's something we anticipated relatively early on. If you are selling the same products that everyone else is selling, then price becomes the differentiator. And there's always someone who would be willing to sell a product for a lower price. And we might be that competitor as well. So, but first and foremost, we know we have to be very competitive. So we start with saying that we are going to be competitive on anything that we sell. But also, we develop a very large percent of our assortments because of the size of our buys, where we have products now that are very exclusive to Macy's. So as an example, Tommy Hilfiger is sold only at Macy's. And you will not find anywhere else except for a couple of his stores or individual stores. Strong John is sold only at Macy's. Kipling is only sold at Macy's. I can go on and on and on and tell you about all the various businesses that are only available at our stores. 20% of our total business is our private brands that we design and create for our stores. So you add it all up, and it's a significant portion of business that is not available for showrooming because it's available at Macy's.
Only get it at one place.
Right. That's key. That's key. And obviously, I always say to my own buyers, I don't want to have exclusive product just for the sake of having exclusive product. It needs to be the most wanted product that happens to be exclusive. And so that combination is special. And then, of course, when we work with our big suppliers like Ralph Lauren, Calvin Klein, and the like, they also give us merchandise that is exclusive to us because we can afford to buy their entire allotment of a certain sweater or a certain.
Put the slides back on. So you see, he's talking about, the CEO of Macy's is talking about product exclusivity. They can tie up with manufacturers like Tommy Hilfiger, and if you really wanted a Tommy Hilfiger shirt, Macy's is the only place pretty much for you to go. And so if you wanted that shirt, you will end up buying at Macy's. You cannot buy it at Amazon. That ensures that you are protected from this competition from Amazon. And so this is the kind of approach, this product exclusivity approach that's and this kind of an approach is harder to implement than price matching, right? Because you have to set it up with manufacturers. You have to set up your supply chains in a different way. You have to, at the design stage itself, what goes into your shelves, that is sort of, you have to step back and, plan for that. But turns out that this research shows that this strategy works pretty well. I don't know if that is a sort of a justification here, but if you look at the stock market, Macy's stocks are doing much better today than Target or Best Buy stocks. So I don't know. So that's one thing. The second thing is this product exclusivity approach works even better in combination with other kinds of approaches which can help make product matching harder. So I'll give you this example of Costco. So what Costco does is that you have got all these products which have got barcodes on those. Now suppose even clothes, apparel will have that. Now suppose if you are in a store, I like this product. Now I want to quickly check whether the same kind of product is available at Amazon or not, and what is the price. What is the quick way of doing it? You use a smartphone, you have an app, you quickly scan the barcode, and then this app will find out the matching product for you at Amazon. This is very fairly simple kind of a thing. In order to discourage this kind of an approach, some of these retailers like Costco are actually going ahead and taking the effort to change the barcodes on the merchandise. So that you can't use those apps. Obviously, it is expensive for the retailers to do so because you have to individually change the barcodes and everything, but they're still doing it. And the combination of this product exclusivity and this change of actually works even better. And the third kind of an approach is imported all the way from Australia. See this? And probably you might remember this from the early days of shopping malls in India, also where we actually had to pay to get in. And even now, so in some shopping malls, there's no parking fee. But implicitly, shopping malls that become very crowded, they start putting a parking fee. They don't want too many people. You don't have the right kind of footfalls, right? So this is the third kind of an approach that is actually coming back in, even in Western countries. Again, the research shows that this kind of an approach also works. But the caveat here is obviously that if you're going to start doing something like this, then you have to be very careful in implementing it because there can be potential damage to your brand value, right? Because if other brick and mortar stores are not doing it and you're doing it, this could be potentially a problem. So I guess this was the quick sort of message I had from my research. So I'm going to stop at this now, and I'm going to call our next speaker, Mr. Vivek Pathak. Please come. Do you want the call? Yeah, sure. Good afternoon. How are you guys today? Great. My name is Vivek Pathak. I work on product development at eBay Inc., based in Bangalore. And today I'm here to talk to you about the various evolving e-commerce business models that an aspiring retailer that wants to start using online channels for its growth, and share some of the strategies that they could consider as they start walking down this path. And this is the brief agenda that I intend to cover in the next 10 to 15 minutes. Let's start from the beginning in terms of how does the e-commerce landscape look like globally. Over the last 5 years, e-commerce sales have grown at twice the rate of regular retail sales. And as you can see, there is growth coming across the world. The main drivers are most of the emerging market economies like Latin America, Middle East, Asia Pacific, and Central and Eastern Europe. And the growth rates are in excess of 20%, some places even as high as 30%. However, the thing to note is, as a pie of the total retail sales, e-commerce is still in single digits. In America, which is probably one of the most developed markets, it's still at 8%. E-commerce sales are still at 8% of the total pie. In Europe, it's at about 10%. In China, one of the leading emerging market economies, it's at 6.8%. But for India, the figure is 0.1%. So there is still a lot of headroom to grow in terms of e-commerce sales. And what we have been noticing at eBay for the last couple of years is there are two distinct drivers that are pushing this growth. And the trend is essentially towards adoption of a lot of web-enabled smartphones in many of these emerging markets, and some of it that's one of the running theme that I'm given to believe was being spoken about in the last 1.5 days. And the other one is a lot of brick and mortar stores increasingly going down the online channel path to increase their footprint, increase their customer acquisition, and then also increase their sales. And we expect this trend to continue for some time. So that's probably the next frontier of globalization as we think of e-commerce. For any business to succeed, they need to have a model, and e-commerce is no different. But one thing is very important, especially in consumer retail, is that all of this needs to really hinge on great buyer experience. You guys would have read or noticed or spoken with a lot of people about various exotic and innovative models in this nascent e-commerce industry right now. But there are two models that have stood the test of time over the last decade or two. And both of them are fairly well known. The first one is the inventory-led model, which is the retailer model. A marquee example for that would be Amazon globally and Flipkart in India. The other one, on the other hand, is a marketplace model. So the first one is an inventory-led model. The second one is a community-led model. So let's spend a few minutes trying to understand what these are and what they really mean for a retailer who's actually thinking about ways and means to get onto the online commerce bandwagon. In the retailer model, it's essentially shopfront selling. Essentially, you have a brand, you have invested in a brand, people are coming to your shop, and then essentially taking it's more in the virtual space than actually physically walking into a store. And to be able to give a great experience, in this model, you need to stock your own inventory and invest heavily in the in-house logistics department. This actually gives you a complete control over the entire value chain of the transaction, right from the moment buyer walks in till the time the buyer is satisfied with the purchase. And it has its own positives and negatives. I mean, you can really control the customer delight points across the value chain and then really drive value from that. Marketplaces, on the other hand, is essentially a platform, a discovery platform for sellers and buyers that are looking to transact. One interesting aspect of the marketplace model is there is no inventory to hold, because it's actually the seller who holds the inventory and also takes care of fulfillment or all the logistics associated with it. So that's an interesting segue in the marketplace model. That also makes it probably more capital efficient because you really don't have to deploy capital on a lot more moving pieces that you would have done in an inventory-led model and really put that in investing in technology. And there's also the angle of network effects that I will talk about in a bit. So this kind of gives a general overview about inventory-led versus community-led models. But from a retailer perspective who's considering between these two models, let's dive in a little more. Inventory-led models traditionally have had a challenge around scale and productivity. Customer delight is always good, but it also comes at a price. And the correlation between the expenses to get customer delight is almost linear. For every new customer that you acquire, you really have to invest more. For every new city that you add, every new pin code that you add to deliver, there is so much more you have to invest in the logistics arm. So there have always been challenges around scale and profitability in this model. But not to say that this is a bad model. It's just that this is the inherent nature of it because there's so many more moving pieces one has to deal with. And it also requires significant capital upfront. And one of the reasons why Amazon has been such a big success is the investors have been extremely kind with it in terms of giving it a very long rope to show profitability. And you know, they've run for a decade almost with negative returns, but eventually then there's a tipping point and then scale really matters. But then that also brings the question of long lead times. It takes a while to build up an inventory-led model. Many of you might know, or if you don't know, it's an interesting snippet. Amazon reportedly invests only in 2 categories every year because launching a category has a whole bunch of things associated with it. There are a lot of nuances around learning around, like if you want to launch electronics as a category, there are nuances versus launching books as a category. So there's longer lead time. And obviously there are lower margins because of so many more moving parts. But still, since you're controlling the entire value chain, you really have a lot of more opportunities to give customer delight. So really the key challenge comes down to balancing customer experience with costs. Marketplace, on the other hand, has completely different set of problems. The first one is around buyer experience and building trust. Here, you really have an unknown buyer and unknown seller, or a third-party buyer and third-party seller. So it's kind of very difficult to monitor and police this effectively at scale. And this becomes a very important fulcrum on which your marketplace succeeds. The second one, though, is a corollary to that. It also allows a lot of small merchants and retailers to participate and leverage the network effect. While it sounds appealing, a marketplace is very, very difficult to create. Essentially, you're trying to build 2 companies at the same time. It's like the proverbial chicken and egg problem. A thriving marketplace is a place which attracts buyers, but buyers come when there's a lot of inventory. And a lot of merchants come and put up their inventory only when they know there is buyer interest. There's a lot of traffic being driven. So while it takes off, the networking effects kind of move very fast, and the winner takes it all kind of a phenomenon exists. But to get it going is always the tough part. So these are the 2 business models that have largely stood the test of time, and only time will say how they will evolve or morph. But since the topic is also more around how do we see this in Indian context, I'd like to do a quick segue into seeing how India has evolved, how internet and commerce have evolved in India, and how these models have found their place and niche over the last couple of years. My take is slightly different on this slide. I'm not going to throw numbers about what is the internet penetration, stuff like that. I'm sure some other noted speakers would have already covered that. But I really want you to think more from a perspective of consumers. What were the hooks that got consumers attached to the internet, get the internet usage going, and how these business models evolved eventually around it? So if you remember the good old days of 56 kbps modem, it was all about basic internet access. You had static websites you could go and read, look at pictures and enjoy, and do some basic communication through email. But then something happened after that. There came in a time when there was non-monetary engagement, which was much more deeper. There was always a fragmented demand. There was always a rudimentary marketplace that existed, especially around matrimony, especially around job search. People were really, marriage is an institution which is very important, at least in this country, and there's always people looking for getting 2 people be met. It started from the local barber in villages to the sophisticated websites that you have now. Many of these places, again, the engagement was very basic, like submit your resume, we will get in touch with you over email, or upload your profile. So some early entrepreneurs saw this opportunity and they said this is something that can scale up very quickly with very relatively low costs. And this really picked up. And this non-monetary engagement became the next fulcrum in which the shift happened. But as time went by, a lot more sophistication started building in, network speeds came in, and also organizations started realizing the value of it. And then came in online commerce. And obviously everybody knows the poster child of online commerce is IRCTC. That's where everything started in terms of people really engaging and actually being willing to part with their monies to get going. Part of the reason is also how the country was evolving. Services were actually getting pressure. There was information asymmetry. There was lack of transparency. I mean, some of you might know how it was to book railway tickets before the online computerized reservation system came in. It was a nightmare. So it kind of brought a bit of democracy in terms of this information moving, and travel sites became like the poster child. And obviously there was an explosion around plastics, both credit cards and debit cards about 10 years back, and that also started creating the right ecosystem for things to pick up. But what really explains the explosion of so many sites and so many business models in the last 4 or 5 years, especially around 2008-ish or so? You have horizontal retail, you have vertical retail, you have virtual shopping sites, you have store-in-store like Via.com. Much of it also had to do with some of the hype that was being generated around e-commerce and flow of a lot of venture funds, venture capital coming into the country, and that kind of got everybody excited. So part of it is also because of easy money and availability and the general promise that it's a young population and things will go on and move forward. But as Professor was also alluding a while back in his talk, things are very dynamic in the e-commerce space. And before long, what was the scenario last year and the scenario right now, things are changing. And we at eBay are kind of keeping a very close tab on how things are evolving here. And what we notice is now the shift is slightly moving from, if I dare may say, from inventory-led model to marketplaces model. And it has its own pluses and minuses as I discussed. But really that's something that is kind of moving. I mean, Flipkart, as you know, has already started adopting marketplace as a model. Snapdeal is something that eBay has invested in, and they're kind of moving from a daily deals or a deals platform into a marketplace. So there is a sense of that shift that is happening. And with this, I would really like to give a flavor of what eBay has been doing. I mean, eBay has kind of associated with the marketplace model. So let me talk a little bit about how eBay is working on solving those two big pain points that a marketplace model inherently has, which is customer delight and buyer trust. So creating a great buyer experience is key, irrespective of the model. And at eBay, there are a couple of things that we are doing. While we understand that much of the stuff is also driven by the merchant, because ultimately he's a seller, but we can actually start adding layers on top of it in terms of almost like a storefront run retail promotions, essentially aggregate information across merchants and get them run as retail promotions. Help them with merchandising, because we actually invest a lot in that. Start leveraging our technology and the network effects that we have in our systems. We have a whole bunch of engineering resources dedicated to start tracking clicks, start tracking user behavior, and then ensure that we start improving browser-based experiences for the users to find what they're really looking for. Also help with personalization wherever it is legally allowed and what we can do with technology, not really tweaking too much with the merchants right over the customer. And also help in terms of innovations like product finders. Some of you might remember the movie called Minority Report, where once Tom Cruise is identified as a criminal, or rather a future criminal, he's walking into he's trying to escape, and then he's walking into a mall, and all the stores in the mall are reading up his retina and then throwing products at him saying, you should take this, you might like this. We're kind of reaching, that's what we are aspiring to move into, where we can actually really predict what you're really looking for. So there's a lot of search science that we are investing in. The good part about this model is eBay is investing much of the capital efficiency that we built in this model. Rather than deploying towards logistics or brand building, we're really directing it towards technology. And some of that actually is a benefit that a first-time retailer can leverage right off the bat. So that's probably one of the things that we are hoping will satisfy both the sellers and the buyers. The other big piece is, and probably this model that you see here is applicable for any business model, whether it is inventory-led or marketplace. But from a marketplace perspective, these are the three pillars on which we really want to ensure that we build engagement and loyalty. Why do buyers come online? To find great deals, and they get burnt if they don't get any of these three things right. With regards to trust, it's important that in a marketplace there is enough trust built in, and there are various ways to implement it. At eBay, we do this by being extremely rigid about how we vet and get new sellers into the system. And there are a lot of levers, both overt and covert, that we use. Some of them range from holding back payouts for new merchants until they have developed certain amount of volume, or doing additional checks over a period of time. All of this to push and build trust in the system. The second piece is around value. It's important that there are great deals available. And one of the good parts about marketplace is everything is transparent. There is a lot of rationalization around price. So if there is a particular product that somebody is willing to sell for 100 rupees and there's somebody who's trying to charge 500 rupees, he gets caught out right away. So there's a lot of rationalization of products, and there's a lot of transparency that we start building, and so there's value that a customer sees. And somehow Indian customer is inherently hardwired to figure out what the right value for a product should be, and that's something that really helps in this context. And the third one is selection, always a problem. Trying to build the long tail supply for a product which is probably not very fast moving is always a challenge for an inventory-led model, because you might stock it and there's a cost to store it, and there's a lot of monies that go upfront. But here, the idea is to get the selection going. Now, traditionally, eBay has focused more on consumer-led selection getting created, where you have like, I want to sell my old television and you want to buy it, stuff like that. But we also realized in the last few years, it's important to rope in large retailers, because they actually help increase the breadth and depth dramatically in a very short period of time. So if you notice, it is the combination of these three things that actually help you build engagement and loyalty, and trust actually is the most important aspect. So these are some of the ways and means, some of the strategies that probably a new retailer should keep in mind as he thinks of getting on the online channels to start pushing their business. And that's all that I had to share with you. Thank you.
Floor is all yours, 15 minutes, please. So you want to give him the caller mic?
So, can you guys hear me? So while that is coming up, so let me just, in the interest of time, let me introduce myself. Saran, Chatterjee from Flipkart. I've been at Flipkart for 9 months. I've learned a lot about e-commerce, all the pains that come with it. So what I'll do is, I put this presentation together fairly quickly, but given some of the context that has already been set, I'll use some of the slides as mostly, okay, don't steal my thunder before. Open the PowerPoint. Okay, that was the best part of my presentation. Everything leading up to it is going to be just pure what I say. So cool. So I've been at Flipkart, as I said, for 9 months, and it's been great. Great learning. As both Professor and Vivek have been saying, right? This landscape, especially in India, has been changing dramatically. We are learning a lot. Our competition is obviously helping us learn a lot. And and the way we see it, it's going to be exciting times in the next 1 to 2 years at least, and more. So by no means am I an expert in supply chain, logistics, payments. I head products, I build products. I am the guy that builds products for users. So what I'll try to do is, at least based on my last 9 months at Flipkart, what I've learned, especially being the guy who's sort of driving products for consumer experience, I will try to bring in sort of my own personal sort of take along some of the key pain points that I feel are, that we feel in terms of growth for e-commerce. So just quickly, numbers may have been shared, but this is why I sort of left Yahoo and joined Flipkart, to be part of this growth. So again, don't look at the slides too much, but so last year, e-tailing, when I say e-tailing, this is excluding all kind of travel related buying, so mostly goods and services. So e-tailing this year roughly ended at about $1 billion, $1.5 billion in India, size of the market. This market is expected to be about, depending on which research analyst you go with, between 50 and $75 billion in the next 6 to 7 years. And that is what excites me. And the thing about Flipkart that has sort of, that got me excited was, part of it is because us and all of our competitors together are actually defining this market. So for instance, it could be 70, it could be 150, who knows? It's how we define it, it's how we solve some of the problems for our users together, and that's what, the offline spending, all of the work that's happening on the offline side, shifting some of that online is what is exciting us. So huge, the market itself in India is going to be great, so that's what's attracting a lot of global players into this market. So just as a context, so the opportunities are huge, but sort of in terms of my take on what some of the challenges would be to sort of get a fair share of that pie, it's up for grabs, right? So supply chain. Now I think Vivek set a very good context in terms of inventory-led and marketplace. So we started off as being a traditional online retailer. And it's been great. And we've learned about the challenges in supply chain, as you pointed out very rightfully so. Huge capex investments, but those also serve as advantages in terms of consumer delight. So in terms of supply chain, that is one area that we need to solve, whether it's inventory-led or marketplace. Because at the end of the day, the consumer has to be happy. And if that product that the consumer is getting at the end of it reaches him in 15 days or doesn't reach him, gets canceled at the end of 10 days, I don't know, some of you may have read some recent social media posts on Flipkart. So we are feeling the pains of the sort of the marketplace model, right? So all of this eventually boils down to kind of how efficient or how have you sort of worked out your sort of fulfillment engine and post-order customer experience, right? So that is a challenge. It needs to be worked out. It needs to be solved. Payments, won't get into the details of payments, but again, I mean, at least from what we see, we could very easily have a 25 to 30% upside on our business if we actually solve payments well. So very recently we launched PayZippy, which is sort of our own payment solution, and the objective of that was to be able to drive more sort of conversions, more efficiencies in terms of how users, especially that are trying to sort of make that online payment, how sort of how efficient it is for them and how accurate and successful it is. Awareness. Generally, what we are seeing again, I mean, mostly metro and tier 1 is where bulk of the business is coming from, right? But the reach of India, the sort of the power of this audience is going to be beyond tier 1, going into tier 2 and sort of most of these other markets, right? Even within metro and tier 1, what we are seeing is that one, the general sort of awareness of online shopping and the trustness in it to shop online. People still are very used to here to the touch and feel, sort of going to the mall and buying, which is mostly our organized and unorganized offline retail. We've sort of, we do a lot of user studies, and what we find is when we talk to users, say, why didn't you buy that mobile phone from Flipkart? And he said, that phone was 5,000 rupees cheaper for people that are from Bangalore in this road called SP Road in Bangalore. And I don't care about, I am willing to take that 45-minute hike to SP Road to get that phone. I'll be okay. So I think I'll talk about some of the other challenges, but we have a lot of, these people that are sort of, most of these guys are still comfortable going to the SP roads and buying their mobile phone and not buying it from a traditional sort of, from the online medium. So I think that awareness has to go, the ability to sort of, they have to have that confidence, they have to feel the convenience of buying online. All of that stuff we're going to talk about. Category-specific nuances, right? Whether you're selling lifestyle or whether you're selling electronics, books, digital, doesn't matter. Every single product in each of these diverse categories have their own specific challenges, whether it's the buyer experience or whether it is the post-order experience, everything, right? So it takes, and I think Vivek alluded to the Amazon philosophy of launching 2 categories per year, because you have to get good at it. You launch a half-baked solution, then users will sort of eventually complain. Post-order concerns, I kind of talked about it. So I'm going to rush through this. So supply chain, right? So our stance essentially, and has been to own our supply chain and logistics, whether it is in our traditional inventory-led model at least for our marketplace model also, we are going, our expectation is to be able to do a fulfillment by Flipkart type of an approach, right? Similar to what Amazon does. And it's a simple reason, right? Because when a company like Flipkart, when it grew, it actually solved the problem of service, which was a huge pain in India. And it solved the problem of service in a very unique way. Users got used to that level of service. You ordered a book back then, Flipkart told you you would get it in 3 days, you got it in 1 day, right? I mean, so that was, and these are still, we get some of these customer testimonials that, that is still a huge sort of, delight. Over time, as you scale, obviously there are challenges to scale. So 2 to 3 days, you try to hold up to your end of the promise. You say 2 to 3 days, you stick to 2 to 3 days. And then what happens is, go from 2 to 3 days, it becomes 5 to 8 days or 10 days. Then that's where, the user starts to feel the pain, right? So I think the point about this is to have control of the processes, the tools, all the systems that go behind, warehousing and logistics to be able to control eventually that customer experience. And there is a very big component here, which is sort of the whole relationship with your suppliers and sellers as well, right? So generally, we talk about 2 big processes. One, which is the procurement to pay. So you procure, and then how do you pay your suppliers? That's a process which we're continuously trying to refine. And the second piece, which I think pertains more to, is your order to delivery, and then from delivery to cash, which is more of sort of the Flipkart, internal to Flipkart, right? So talking about sort of extending beyond that in terms of working with the suppliers and sellers in terms of educating them, right, on what the best practices are, educating them, working with them on technology solutions. Amazon, Walmart, these guys have done it tremendously well, right, in US. And there's learnings, and there are times when we actually go, share some, and try to get some of those learnings from them, because, at the end of the day, the users who will benefit from all of this, right? So educating, learning, building the right technology solutions to do what matters. I think the piece that we are seeing also from our end mile logistics is users are, there is a need to be able to schedule your delivery. There is a very pertinent use case that at least in the context of Flipkart, that's emerging, right? There are guys who are not home, just the way it's set up, gated communities, blah, blah, blah. Half the times you can't even go inside the complex because of, the guy's not home at that point and things like that. So being able to schedule a delivery, saying that whether it's a day of the week or time of the day, it's a huge requirement that we get from our users. Sort of staying along sort of the last mile delivery options, right? I mean, again, these are specific requests that we get from our customers, right? In terms of, again, solved very well, US, Europe, right? So physical pickup joints, right? Where you go, your shipment's delivered to a specific location, and then you can go pick it up at your own convenience later on. But the bottom line here is to be able to control all of that, sort of when I say controlling the supply chain, I mean being able to do all of these things at a much, much better way, in a way which is much better than anybody else, at least in India, that can do this, right? And all of this obviously leading to superior, just user delight. Payments, I'm not going to do too much. COD was, one of the things that we used to kind of get over the hurdle of buying in India. And now, now when we are sort of looking at fashion, there's a new model that's sort of being, that users are demanding, which is sort of more cash on satisfaction, right? It's not cash on delivery anymore. It's like, I want to see that damn product, I want to wear it, I want to try it, I want to feel it, and then I want to pay you. So internally, we kind of joke about this, right? We probably need to start a cash on satisfaction model, right? So, but anyways, time will tell. But these are very India specific. It's what users in India demand, and you have to solve for them. You can't just say, well, there is that prepaid option, and whenever you have a credit card, you go pay, right? So users will like, yeah, great. I'll go to the nearby mall or whatever, and I'm just going to go buy from them, right? So these are kind of the hurdles that we have to solve. Even cash on delivery, while it was a great innovation, but there's tremendous challenges related to cash handling processes, right? We have a team now internally that's basically chasing down all these FE guys that disappear with the cash. And then you're like, you're going to go chase them. We have this full team of guys who are going to chase and recover the money. I hear the success rate is pretty good in terms of recovering that money, but don't quote me on that. So I think payments in general, like, when it comes to sort of more of the prepaid level, like, just payment gateway success rates, policies. So we have a team now. We are fairly lucky that the guy at least on the technology side, that's heading up payments in Flipkart, was actually one of the first guys in the world to have built the payment switch in Bell Labs or somewhere. Smart guy. He has his own quirks, but he's sort of, he's helping us define how we should be solving payments for India. So we feel fairly good about sort of our, upside and future here. But part of it is also working with the guys on policies. There's tremendous policy issues around payments that we need to sort of work with the right government bodies to align on. India versus West, I think this is also a very, sure, I'm going to zip through this. I think most people probably know this. Just providing better selection, payment options, supply chain fragmented beyond the metros. How do you solve all of that? In US has the benefit of sort of having well-established policies and guidelines. We don't. Refund policies, much more consumer friendly in the West. Here, depends on any given day, this could vary. So there's this huge challenge of disorganized retail, right? I talked about the SP roads, and every city has its own SP road essentially. So how do you sort of deal with that? So looking ahead, I'm just going to I think shift to online. I'm just going to touch on this very briefly, which is eventually at the end of the day, whether it's inventory led or marketplace, the goal obviously is to provide. We feel that users are going to shift online given you have the best selection at the best price. In India today, that differentiation between offline and online, at least from a pricing standpoint, in the minds of a large majority of the users is still not very, it's not clear. I mean, they still feel that I could still get the same price, offline. And to them, it's about more of the convenience, right? So pricing, selection, service, convenience, and giving them sort of the trustness and the confidence. M-commerce happening, I'm pretty sure somebody must have talked about it. Interest of time, I'm skipping through this. We already see about 15% of our business now happening through mobile, and we haven't even launched a native app yet, so it's crazy. So I mean, we feel good again. I mean, that the fact that users are sort of, and 70% of these orders are actually from people that have not placed a single order on a desktop. It's crazy, right? So these are people that are buying primarily through that handheld. And that's why we feel that, that's where we kind of really need to focus to make sure that we can tap more of these users and get them to visit and buy more frequently. New experiences, again, kind of out there. We need to kind of solve this. So in the interest of time, I'm going to leave you with this. So given all of this, this is hot off the press, by the way. I don't know how many of you have seen this on Facebook, but for the rest, for your viewing pleasure. Given all of these challenges that I talked about, right? The trustness, the confidence, the shift to online. So what we did was we said, why not sort of create a TV campaign that basically touches upon all of these. Can we just fire it up in the meantime? Why don't we just touch upon all of these criteria and see if we can sort of reach the mass. When I say mass, I mean beyond tier 1, sort of going to tier 2, tier 3, and giving them the confidence to buy online. So this TV campaign, it's one amongst 4. I'm just showing you one. But this is meant to sort of address some of those concerns of our users. Should play. Volume. Come on, you guys are stealing my thunder here. Okay, so I'll leave you with that thought. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saran. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to make 2 comments and then open the floor for discussions. How many of you like and you eat Domino's at home, Domino's pizza at home? And did you start eating it after the 30-45 minute guarantee? Did you like that? Well, I was talking to Mr. Ajay Kaul, who is the CEO of Domino's, and he was talking about that, it depends that India and US are fundamentally at different levels of development. And in US, it is more about marketing, just reaching the consumer. Customer is the king, which is true in India as well. But a lot of supply chain is commoditized in the US. You can do all of this stuff very easily in the US. You want to get a pizza in 30 minutes somewhere, you can get it. The road infrastructure is so good. But it is really a big problem in India, right? And so if you can actually build your capability on the top of that infrastructure and then provide value to customer, you can really get customer delight. So, in some sense, supply chain can actually end up delighting the customer, which is what you want. And this is what, he was talking about supply chain a lot, Saran. And I think that this is really a very important takeaway from here, that being in India, if you can do good supply chain, forget everything else, you will build your brand. So that's number one. And number two, again, the issue that you alluded to, the disorganized retail part, and I'm sort of trying to get back to that. The first day of this conference, we had a pre-conference event, which was like a small and medium businesses workshop, and in which some Google people were presenting, how Google is trying to help these disorganized retailers get set up, okay? And they actually have an initiative which they call, I think, Get Business Online. Get India Online, okay? And they said that, they went to Chandni Chowk in Delhi, and they're talking to a lot of businesses, and they were just trying to get them online. And these people, 5,000 shops in Chandni Chowk, 1,500 of them came back to us, because once the websites were set up, they started getting a lot of, traction. And people actually wanted to buy online from Chandni Chowk people. So, just both of your comments, they are not really Flipkarts. They will never be Flipkarts. But, should this be what they should be doing, or should they be on eBay? What were your comments on that? Both of you, please.
Okay, I'll take that. So prior to eBay, I was with Google, and I was involved in that Get India Business Online initiative. So, excellent. It's an interesting take. Making life easy for small retailers to get online and have an online presence is just first step in a fairly long journey of engagement. We've done this. This actually called It's actually called GXBO, Get X Businesses Online, and it is applicable in any country: Thailand, Indonesia, Africa, and stuff like that. It's important to get them, and especially the Chandni Chowk example really stands out, because there was much of the stuff that is sold there is handmade. It is not something which is replicable. It is not industry grade, and these guys really do business by word of mouth. And amplifying that word of mouth on a pan-India footprint, or even beyond Indian footprint, is something that this enables. So while it is good to get people started and start the queries moving in, the idea is the ecosystem ready to support that? And part of the problem is solved by ensuring that you leverage social media, also leverage adverts. I mean, some of you might know that Google actually offers this 2,000 rupees cash back if for a first-time advertiser, at least in India. It's equivalent of $50, but then obviously with the rate going somewhere, so it's good for them. But that's the story there. So it's just first step in a long series of engagement in terms of building the value chain.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think in general for our users, I'll take the user angle here, right? So at the end of the day, we want the best selection sitting at the comforts of our home. So, again, if guys from Chandni Chowk and SP Road, these guys come online, they'll bring the unique selection at their own unique price to the table. Now, there will always be a segment of the user that will find value from that. So one, I think it's incredibly important, because overall that helps sort of build that pie of e-tailing market in India, right? Secondly, as we said, right, as users become more comfortable, as the trustness and all of that stuff is solved, then these guys would see value in being able to buy. At least some users would see value in buying from some of these online or some of these stores that have come online that otherwise they would not have access to, sitting in any other city outside of Delhi, right? So I think it's incredibly important, and that's one thing that we also kind of, I don't know if you know that we recently launched the marketplace, right? But we are going about it in a very managed way right now. We've not sort of opened the kimono to say, come in and come in, self-serve, anybody can come in. It's very managed. But what we're seeing is that, there is this huge demand that's outside that's essentially wanting to come inside. and obviously for obvious reasons we've not opened the door, but I think we would actually play an equal role in trying to get more people sort of online and help them shop and reach audiences that they would otherwise not have reached.
Thank you. I guess the message over here is that if you've got a particular kind of a product category that's not easily available, you can perhaps start off your presence online by getting online with a website. But as you are pointing out, Vivek, I mean, as you scale up and then the other kinds of problems come by, and that's where if you're on a platform, that helps really.
Yeah.
True.
So,
I mean, leveraging technology at scale becomes easier because that's the network effect that actually starts reduces the entry barrier for a small timer. He doesn't need to worry about a whole bunch of things of discovery and stuff like that. So
sure. Can we have questions from the audience now, please?
Hello. Hi. So a couple of questions. One, we all know this intuitively and there's lots written about it and you guys haven't reflected on it. So I just want you to highlight for us 2 or 3 things that are different about e-tailing in the big cities versus the small cities, right? So for example, traffic as a concern in a commercial isn't such a concern in Indore as it is in Bombay, right? So I just want both of you to reflect on that for the audience. The second part of my question is leading up from the previous session by the professor, which is, are you seeing any action on the comparison shopping app space? Because in India that clearly doesn't exist, right? So if my guess is right, actually it's the reverse behavior, that there's a lot of online research going on and then you go and look at the product later. The auto industry seems to be saying that, the real estate industry seems to be saying that a lot of research is done online and then actually the transaction happens offline, right? So when do you see the reversal of that trend happening?
Sure. Should I start off?
yeah.
So let me sort of rephrase your question. So your first question was difference in ETL between metros and big and small cities. Yes, of course, right? So one thing I tried to point out was just the difference in the supply chain, right? So in terms of the metro itself, in terms of how we service the user, it's essentially for all practical purposes, it's while I won't say it's solved, but it's pretty good. Most players today would deliver within a very reasonable time within metros, and users are generally delighted. The demand from the metros, from a user standpoint, is primarily people that value convenience. There is a price angle to it as well. But there are guys who are, there's obviously a segment of people that are not as price conscious, but from a buyer standpoint, we see a mix. There's the price conscious buyer who, if he finds the right value online through offers or, would buy. And then there is a convenience seeker who would want to buy. However, on the smaller cities, what we see is that most of the demand, and we've done a study to see why some of these guys from the smaller cities are actually buying and why they are not buying. One of the reasons is access to selection, brands. That, for instance, there are guys who would have to drive 100 kilometers, for instance, to get access to a certain type of product, which they now have access to, thanks to all the players that are not delivering to his zip code, right? So most of the demand is, at least in some of the smaller cities is, or let's just say, non-tier 1 cities is coming from that class of buyers.
So I'll take on the second part of the question, and I think it's a great question. Essentially about how is the comparison shopping evolving right now. And it's an interesting piece because comparison shopping, as Saran is also mentioning, it's not always about price. There are a whole bunch of other factors that matter. At eBay, the way we solve this is actually read a lot of data and then essentially start doing some of those pilots and experiments to see what sticks. And I'm happy to share that there's one of the experiments that worked very well for us recently, and it's a browser-based experience, and I was talking about that earlier, is whenever you are, and this only works with a few browsers that we have tie-up with, like on Chrome, if you're actually going and searching for something, say a hard drive, there is a pop-up. I mean, it's an app that you need to enable. There's a pop-up which says, hey, by the way, this is available on eBay at this price. So it's kind of a pop-up which tells you, like, while you are searching and probably it's not there, it just pops and it actually starts expanding your search, and you start seeing far more avenues to go about it. But then again, it's a complex problem to solve. It's not always about price, it's about convenience. I personally, I've just recently moved to Bangalore, and I'm trying to set up my personal home theater, and I'm trying to get these UPS boxes. I'm still deciding, should I just go to a the market, as he says, and then get a knock off a few hundred or thousand rupees versus just go and look at convenience. So it's something which is consumer led rather somebody sitting in a white box and deciding, okay, this is the way you should search. So I think it's more of an evolutionary piece right now, and that's where we are.
But I think, but it's going to happen. I mean, as players become bigger, as e-commerce, as I said, it's $1 billion only, right? As the size of the market becomes bigger, as some of the players get bigger, as you have more selection, as the prices will vary between all of these different players, then that need for comparison shopping across any category that you can think of will actually increase. It's just that the market, the online space, it's $1 billion in the grand scheme of things. It's small.
Although just to add on to that, in a marketplace model, there is price rationalization and transparency right there. If you're looking for a phone here, you will have 7 or 8 retailers giving their best price. But there is another interesting problem which probably nobody's thinking much about, is what about price rationalization across platforms? So there is marketplace A, there's marketplace B. So how does one go and get that a mega search, if you will, so that multiple marketplaces get compared? And that's an interesting problem we need to solve.
Hi, Saran, Alok. This is Kunal from the American Express Bank. I have a very basic question. There's been a lot of debate about the brick and mortar versus the online model. While the regular, or we talk about the modern retail chains, be it Future Group or Shoppers Stop, they already hold the online portals. It's somehow not been able to crack the numbers which you guys have been able to do so. Now, my question to you here is that once you reach to a level where you have scaled your business from the online perspective, how important do you feel that it will be that you need to step out into the brick and mortar model? Giving that example is that yatra.com or the other websites which are there have finally taken a call and they have started to open up small outlets in cities. Because the penetration for the country in terms of payment modes, being from a bank, the credit card penetration is not more than 3.5% to 4% in the country. So how do you think, where you have the masses to reach out for and tap the right target audience? So would brick and mortar be something which you feel is going to make a viable business solution?
It's a great question, and it's something that we've been sort of debating. While there's, at least Flipkart doesn't have a definitive answer on that yet, but it's something that we think about. And at least generically speaking, again, we are seeing that to get more people to buy confidently online, one of the hurdles obviously is that whole touch and feel angle. But then there is this whole, as I was alluding to in my presentation, the post-order experience. Like, if I buy this, will this thing come to me first? And when this thing comes, will that right thing come to me? Or would something completely different or damaged? And then if that happens, then how do I return it in a way that is, that doesn't sort of increase my risk, right? So all of these are very pertinent questions in the minds of the user or the buyer. And this question actually increases as you go from that savvy online guy, as we say, to a non-savvy online guy. The non-savvy guy could exist in the metros, and the non-savvy guy could also exist in the tier 2. It's a mindset, right? So we've been thinking. In fact, we did experiment with one in a mall in Hosur Road, just to kind of see in Bangalore. Just to see what happens, and it was unprecedented, right? Everybody came and said that, hey, listen, I mean, my order didn't show up. It was mostly service related, right? And we couldn't tackle that scale. So we said, I think we would do it at a point where we would be comfortable, where one, it aligns with our overall business objectives, and secondly, we can service and handle those kind of requests and queries in a much more sort of scalable way. But I think it's on the table, especially the non-savvy online guy or the non-savvy shopper.
So that's good to hear that. Thanks so much.
Good morning, I'm Aditi.
Hi, I'm Saransh. So two questions actually. One is that we talked about offline to online price comparison, but there is also online to online price comparison. Like if I talk about the specific example, there is Snapdeal, there is Flipkart, there is Amazon, and there is eBay. all of these providers fantastic services. Then as a customer, if I want to buy a tablet, I would not mind it buying from any of these, and I would look for the price. So how do we tackle this? And the second question is on FDI. What is Flipkart's take on it, and what is eBay's take on it?
So let's take the first question first. I got to rush to the airport, by the way. So your first question was this whole comparison shopping between players who offer similar type of service, right? And then as a user, I think users have preference, right? Every user. I think some of it the professor also alluded to, right? When all things being equal, if the only difference is say price, then as players, I think as players for us to be able to compete effectively, we need to figure out how do we differentiate along more vectors than just price, to be able to create that right differentiation in the minds of the user. Now, beyond price, if you're saying service, then can I up the bar on service even more than what my guys are doing from an SLA standpoint, what other players are doing? If it is not service, if service is equal, then can I up the bar on, say, customer service, right? In terms of being able to pick up the phone and talk to somebody. If that also becomes equal. So bottom line is that, for every player to be playing sustainably in a market, everybody needs to sort of find their, niche, right? Or what is it that they are really good at, and then get really good at it and create that differentiation in the minds of their users, right? Which is where they'll get their loyalists. Yeah. And every company has that.
So if you recollect in one of the slides that I presented, it's a triad. It's trust, value, and selection. So whether you're comparing, online retailers, it ultimately boils down to this equation: trust, value, and selection. And there is always this, creative tension that exists between them. As long as you solve that, it's fine. Coming to the second point about FDI, still it's early days what to comment because the way government is going here and there, but it's good for us. At least from an eBay perspective, it's good because we are a platform player. We are not really stocking inventory, so we are not really circumventing the rules. We are actually letting commerce thrive for local partners. So it's not really making a big dent for us.
What I wanted to ask was that in the e-tail space, there's a particular conflict between brand recall and brand loyalty. When you ask somebody, where would you like to shop at, they would probably tick at an eBay or a Flipkart. But when they actually go online and shop, they might end up comparing prices and shopping somewhere else. So is that a major challenge? How major a challenge that is, and how do you tackle it?
Sure. Should I go? Okay, go.
So you're right. Brand salience is a problem. We notice it all the time. eBay can get people come there, but ultimately they will go to some unknown retailer. And then again, it's a very personal thing, right? Somebody's looking for price, somebody's looking for convenience. It's not so easy to do that. And especially, as I was mentioning earlier, the Indian consumer is very value conscious. And then value, the definition really differs from each socioeconomic level quite a bit, convenience versus price. So that is a challenge which will remain. Question to really ask is, how much can a retailer invest in brand building and be able to sustain it? That's a very, very important aspect. And we have seen there's a lot of fatigue that has built in, at least in the Indian e-commerce players, that they have invested a lot of money in brand building. But then, as you rightly said, they've popularized e-commerce, but then probably they're not getting the right ROI for that because it's kind of getting fragmented.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, if the way we look at it is that, we coin a term internally, it's called organic loyalty. So not loyalty through some points or whatever, right? It's loyalty through just delighting the consumer constantly. And there are multiple ways to sort of drive that loyalty. And that's our strive, to figure out these dimensions of organic loyalty. Now, organic loyalty could be in the form of a very fast shopping experience. That, if it is etched in the minds of the user, that, hey, listen, every time I go to site A, I can complete my order in a really smooth, efficient way. That builds up a certain perception. Now, if the company A basically does its part to really connect with the audience, to make them feel that, we know about you and we really care about you. When you start building sort of that type of a connection, now The know about you and care about you also happens through multiple ways, right? So personalization was one on the experience itself. On the post-order side, getting a call, being surprised in your shipment, all of these stuff, right? Which tells this guy really knows me and he connects with me. That builds that organic loyalty in the minds of the user. Loyalty is also in the form of account. We use this word account building, meaning how much of your information, how vested are you in this company? How much of your information, for instance, sort of kind of the network effect, but not as much. For instance, all my pictures, say, on Flickr. The need to move somewhere else is fairly low at that point, right? So again, I'm just throwing some points out in terms of organic loyalty to create that sort of, in the minds of that users in terms of making his or her purchase decision.
So thank you.
This is
one last question.
Question here.
Okay.
In fact, two. My first question is to Vivek and Saran, since you are the industry leaders in two different models. And the second one is to you, Saran, specifically, since you are associated with the inventory-based model of e-commerce, and FDI really impacts only the inventory-based model. The first question is that, and basically, Vivek, you also pointed towards that the e-commerce is just a small percentage of the overall retail market in India, which is just probably 1% of the overall retail market in India. But if you look at the e-tail percentage, it is even lesser. The situation is even abysmal. In India, the percentage is 0.15 compared to the percentage in US, which is 5%. In China, it's 6. In Australia, it's 6% again. The second part to this, and another perspective to look at this situation is that only 18% of the total people who are on internet are actually buyers in India, online buyers in India, whereas 64% of the people in the US who are on internet actually buy online, 50% in China, and 55% in Australia. Now, one might argue that India is faced with problems related to fragmented supply chain, trust deficit, and last mile connectivity, which is why the number of online buyers is actually very low as a percentage when it comes to the total number of buyers. The percentage is really low. Now, given that China also faced these problems, what is your perspective on why India should be facing these problems, and what are the reasons behind these?
That's a great question. Couple of things. In terms of evolution, today when you want to buy a 55-inch television in the US, you will not think twice before ordering it online. But that's not the story in India yet. So there is this network effect which takes some time to build, and we have only just started on that journey. The other question in around why is it that it is pretty high in China at this stage? And I may not have the complete answer, but from what we notice is in China, the kind of systems that have been put in place towards last mile connectivity, the kind of, should I say, more in terms of the controls that are put around how deliveries happen, it's far more robust compared to what we have in India at this stage. Not to say that it will not change, but that definitely is a big problem at this point in time.
Okay, that just partially answers the question, but that's fine. The second part of the question, which was specifically for Saran. Saran, generally, we've been talking about how the FDI regulation is impacting the inventory-based models in India. But why only FDI? Why are we waiting for FDI to open up, and why not look at domestic sources of funding which are supported by the government? LIC is one, IDBI is one, SIDBI is another. So what are the challenges around the e-commerce companies in the inventory-based model, specifically reaching out to the government for seeking such sources of funding?
Okay, so that's I would not want to answer that question primarily because I don't think I have the most accurate information related to that. So anything I say, maybe, but my general take as a user is, I think companies, one, you have to kind of look at both the parties, right? So the willingness of some of these guys to invest in something which they've not traditionally done or used to, So do they understand the business model? Do they understand what it means to invest in an e-commerce company? Do they understand, like, there is a, a lead time associated with, so these are all kind of questions that come, especially from the kind of players that you mentioned, that are used to a very different mindset or a different way of thinking when it comes to dishing out funds, right? So that would be my sense that, it's not that you can't, you wouldn't approach, but I think there's to be a fundamental change in mindset from the parties that you mentioned, and also from the sort of these the companies or the entrepreneurs themselves, to be able to sort of creating these access channels to reach out to these guys. Today, if I start something new, if I wanted to say raise money from or get funding from one of these guys you mentioned, then I would not even know where to start. Like, it's not, I mean, a lot of these things have to happen. So, just maybe it's because it's not happened, information is not transparent, it's not clear, there's no process defined around it, there's no ownership, so people choose the, the more sort of, beaten down path in terms of raising capital.
Well, I say thank you for an excellent session, Vivek and Saran, and thank you all for excellent questions as well. I'm sure all of us want some lunch now, so we should proceed.
Before that, I'd like Vinay to give away the token of appreciation. Thank you, Saran. Thank you, Vivek. And thank you, Professor. So we come back at 2:30. And one important announcement, there are feedback forms kept at the reception. We sincerely request you to fill them up for us. See you at 2:30.